Who is the Aga Khan? He is the leader of the Shia Ismaili Muslims, a man whose power was obtained through lineage and not merit or consensus, a true totalitarian by birthright. He is the manufacturer and resource manager of the marginalized, ultimately those who make up the radical left. He is funding the marginalized in an attempt to create a militia, to marshal in social change through factions competing for supremacy, consolidating and centralizing global resources, and establishing a global socialist system.
A true champion of pluralistic societies, His Highness the Aga Khan. We at the International New York Times have collaborated on many endeavors, not least the forums of new diplomacy that we host together with the Académie Diplomatique Internationale, of which the Aga Khan, His Highness, is president. As the leader of the world's Ismaili community, His Highness and his superb team has worked globally towards the elimination of poverty, the promotion of secular pluralism, and the advancement of women. The Aga Khan Development Network he founded is one of the largest private development networks in the world, active in education, preservation, culture, the environment, health, and many, many other endeavors.
The question I have, how is a totalitarian Shia Islamic leader the leading critic of democracy? Not to mention he is the champion of global pluralism, which is the biggest issue the West is confronted with, in so much that factions are being created in order to battle for authority. This tribalism places pressure on democracy and seeks constitutional amendments, ultimately changing the defining principles of statehood and nationality. And to further compound these matters, he holds the title of Your Highness in England and Your Majesty in Iran. But more importantly is that the Aga Khan is the president of the International Diplomatic Academy and the founder of the largest NGO network in the world. These titles grant great access and influence over the West's international relations, negotiations, and terms of agreement. I hope you're asking yourself, why is the main purveyor of fake news, the New York Times, so strongly associated with the Aga Khan? The International Diplomatic Academy is an international organization based in Paris, France, focused on modern diplomacy and international affairs. Founded in 1926, the ADI was, along with Chatham House in London and the Council on Foreign Relations in New York, one of the first policy institutions devoted to the sustained study and analysis of international relations. These organizations and institutions are buried in conspiracies, of great interest and intrigue, but escape the scope of this video. What must be considered is that the Aga Khan, as president of such an organization, allows for the dissemination of Western democracy through international relations, negotiations, and terms of agreement.
I believe that the progress of democracy in our world is fundamentally linked to improving the quality of human life. The promise of democracy is that the people themselves best know how to achieve such progress. But if that promise is disappointed, then democracy is endangered.
Quality of life is based on perception. What needs to be improved is the standard of living, and this improvement in standards will naturally improve the lives of citizens. Now, the standards of living are under great threat with the onset of group dominance in society due to pluralism, which you are the champion of. How do you make citizens' lives better when there are so many factions competing for supremacy? Statehood requires national culture to be clearly defined, establishing a sense of homogeny. This is the only way in which a nation can sustain institutions, culture, and statehood. And I think that is what most governments would like to have.
The enormous refugee crisis that now confronts us is one manifestation of that challenge.
In our last video on NGOs, the Aga Khan had mentioned the incredible relationship he had with the German government, and that the Germans try to solve problems in the same way that he does. Well, the freighter ships picking up the refugees are German NGOs, and the migrants are coming from areas that the Aga Khan has strong relationships and influence over, like Syria, Afghanistan, and nearly all of North Africa. A refugee crisis facilitated and perpetuated by the Aga Khan. Mass migration is a method of warfare. This is an invasion. As stated by the Aga Khan, this is the Ummah, the consolidation of the Islamic community at large, establishing a supra community.
Often, when old autocratic orders yielded, new democratic orders were not ready to thrive, or were walled in by political and ideological dogmas. Today, all across the world, we continue to hear increasingly about a crisis of government, of confidence in governments.
The crisis in government is a result of your invasive practices when it comes to national institutions in pursuit of your global socialism. Your manipulation of institutions and what they represent to the population has tarnished the public's opinion of government's competency and has debilitated living standards.
While the pace of history accelerates, democratic governments often deadlock. Scholars now count a growing percentage of countries as failed democracies.
The deadlock that most Western countries are confronted with is resulting from pluralism and the pursuit of supremacy by these different factions. And as for the scholars stating democracy has failed, are these the same scholars who think gender doesn't exist?
A UNDP survey of South American publics some years ago demonstrated that most people preferred an effective authoritarian government to an ineffective democratic one. Quality of life was the prime concern.
What defines and stabilizes a democracy is its institutional effectiveness. Now, Westerners have come to watch their institutions crumble into dissolution, with education as an example of this breakdown. But where are these cracks forming in the foundation? These institutional fractures, risking stability, are a result of the cooperation agreements the Aga Khan has with many Western countries, ranging from education, culture, human rights, energy, and natural resource management. The Aga Khan's NGOs take first world wealth to aid third world development, the marginalized, and the environment. In turn, this aid translates to the inability to meet national institutional responsibilities. And these government shortcomings are in line with the institutions that your network of civil society NGOs are seeking to overthrow. To quote the Aga Khan, his development network is to realize the social consciousness of Islam through institutional actions.
The topic of democracy and its challenges is one that I have followed closely for a long time, most intently in the developing world of South and West Asia, the Middle East and Africa, where so many members of the Ismaili community live and where so much of our development work takes place.
How is democracy in the developing world? The Aga Khan's influence geographically spans across Syria, Afghanistan, Iran, Pakistan, and includes nearly every coastal country on the continent of Africa. There is little to no democracy, and the standards of living in these areas is considered third world to non-existent. So why are you the leading critic of democracy? How did it come to this, considering you seem to know nothing of what it takes to run a stable democracy?
But what can we say then about why democratic systems often fall short in their efforts to improve the quality of their constituents' lives? Let me suggest 4 elements that could help strengthen democracy's effectiveness in meeting this central challenge. They are improved constitutional understanding, independent and pluralistic media, the potential of civil society, and a genuine democratic ethic.
In accordance to the Aga Khan, the central challenge of Western democratic governments is to improve the quality of life and any failure to do so will prevent a consensus, bringing in a totalitarian leadership, overthrowing our democracy. The Aga Khan's 4 elements to strengthening democratic effectiveness: 1. Improve constitutional understanding, which translates to incrementally overthrowing a nation through the manipulation of its defining principles. 2. Independent media, the manipulation of people by controlling the narrative and the consistency of message. 3. Civil society, manipulating the government by relieving the responsibilities and expenses associated with the marginalized, the Aga Khan being the primary investor of these marginalized. Him and George Soros playing the good cop, bad cop routine. And 4. Democratic ethic. Scholars can't even define ethics, so it's nothing more than a catch-all concept that, when characterized loosely, will allow for the listener to create their own representation and meaning. This all sounds very counterproductive in the pursuit of statehood and nationality and a stable democracy. Like, share, and subscribe. Click that notification button and check us out on social media. Links are in the description below.